Bolzzen Gladiator 6021 has just landed in Australia, and thanks to Bolzzen and Scooter Bros in Brisbane, I was able to get onto one just in time for Christmas. I was super keen to experience how it rides and performs, especially as we're coming from Bolzzen's previous generation, the Dynamo. The Gladiator actually replaces the Dynamo range. I also have a Carbo Wolf Warrior 10 Plus, which is comparable to the Gladiator with a similar battery volts and amp hour rating. The Gladiator 621 follow in a similar vein to the Bolzzen e-scooter lineup with a distinctive aqua blue and black color scheme. The Gladiator model numbers may seem generic and don't readily commit to memory when you're telling someone about the models, but they are actually very descriptive. If you haven't already guessed, the numbers denote the battery capacity. So 5218 is fitted with a 52 volt 18.2 amp hour battery running two 1000 watt motors. And the Gladiator 6021, which we have here, has a 60 volt 21 amp hour battery running two 1200 watt motors, powering through two 30 amp sine wave controllers using unbranded but quote unquote high quality cells. The big news here is sine wave controllers, which give a much smoother throttle control, which is a good thing on powerful scooters like this that offer up to 4000 watts of peak power from the dual motors. The motors are from the same factory as VSET, I'm told, and you might recognize that chunky deck with its distinctive dual charging ports on top. Away from harm's way of side swipes and water splashes, etc. It's also from VSET. The load rating for this Gladiator is 150 kilograms, top speeds quoted at 75 kilometers an hour. The range is 85 kilometers. Using the eco mode, typically it'll be 50 to 60 with dual motors. The charge time, standard 12 hours, 6 hours with the second charger put into it. The weight is up a little bit to just over 35 kilos, and it's got a similar IP rating 54, which means approved for use in light rain and wet surfaces. There have been varying views on the location of the charging ports on the top of the deck, apart from obviously keeping those caps on in light rain. I never found that I was wanting to place my feet that far forward, such that I felt hindered with my foot placement. The only thing I found was that if I wasn't using the rear elevated footrest, adopting a more casual stance with both feet on the deck, then my heel did press up against the hook at the rear of the deck where the folded stem attaches to. Bolzzen described this model as an Australian exclusive. The website refers to them having been designed specifically for the Australian market. While some components like the C-type suspension look familiar compared to the outgoing Dynamo, there's new design elements and components that set this apart from other scooters. And of course there are substantial upgrades from the previous model. Quite apparent is that angular front panel adorned with the Gladiator branding and model and decal houses a unique single into twin adjustable height stem. So the Gladiator provides for quick adjustment of those handlebar heights. With a flick of two clamps, it can be done in a matter of seconds. It's not a common arrangement, but it is practical and certainly fits with the Bolzzen claim or something different, exclusive to Australia. The height of the handlebars, which I measured from the top of the deck, can be adjusted between 900 millimeters through to 1075 millimeters, and they're 670 millimeters wide end to end. This compares, for instance, to the Dynamo. Its height was 1060 and only 600 millimeters wide. On the Wolf Warrior, for instance, it's 960 millimeters high and only 640 wide. That increase will be appreciated by taller riders. There's a little bit of extra work may be required if you routinely fold the scooter for transporting. With the setup to your desired height on those handlebars, if it doesn't match the length where the latch meets the hook when you fold the stem down, you're going to have to not only regularly undo the lower clamps, but you also will need to adjust the height of the bars to meet the hook on the deck, but very minor quibble. The two folding bars have alloy threaded collars, one for each side in the Bolzzen blue. Unlike the plastic collar on the older Dynamo, these are alloy collars. They're knurled with a good diamond cross for grip on them. You know, when you've got a lock and a drinks bag or something else hanging over your front bars and phone carriers and that sort of stuff, we found on the old Dynamo that we obscured that single little black plastic collar on the scoot. It's very easy to forget to regularly check it. The initial acceleration of the square wave controller in our first Bolzzen Dynamo can be a bit touchy and abrupt. The Gladiator controllers, as mentioned, are sine wave, and the throttle response is smooth and easily modulated even with the P12 acceleration setting at the maximum 5 on the throttle display. As long as you're precise and move the throttle trigger with care, the scooter responds very smoothly. Riding on the popular Coolangatta seaside promenades along the coastline with lots of holidaymakers meandering along the way, I found it easy to regulate the speed down to walking pace. Again, with those P12 settings sort of in the high range, I sort of experimented between 3 and 5. In fact, it was possible for me to do slow speed figure eights at walking pace in an empty car park, no trouble at all, with just a little bit of a feather touch on the throttle. I did this in gear 2 and the P12 acceleration was set to the maximum 5. Sure that if you inadvertently give a bit of a pull on that index finger, the Gladiator will certainly surge forward. And if you don't have the kick mode set to 0, that's P9, if you set it to 0, that means the scooter will take off just on the trigger. You don't have to give it a kick along. So, you know, if you're sort of new to scooters, you want to be a bit careful there with a powerful scooter because it'll take off, leaving you behind before you're fully on board. When I was looking through my notes, I was thinking maybe I'm not this sort of performance junkie petrol head I used to be in my youth, because I kept looking at notes looking for where I was banging on about the power. It certainly has got it in spades, but what really struck me and my wife was that it was really a complete package. The brakes, the tyres, there are different tyres, an improvement in tyres fitted to this scooter compared to the previous model, I'm told. The steering stem stability and the effortless suspension. And I really want to emphasize that front end stability, because I'll be honest, I've got a Carbo Wolf Warrior 10 Plus with a true dual stem with the little forks either side. And, I'll be honest, when I first looked at the pictures of this so-called single into dual, I wasn't really convinced. I was a little bit skeptical, and I thought, well, how much is that going to contribute to the stability? It is, after all, still got a very similar, if not the same, single stem latch or a collar that tightens up on it. But it is a world away from our first Dynamo. Maybe the tolerances on our first Dynamo weren't great. There always seems to be 1 or 2 mils of play in there, no matter how tightly I do that Dynamo up. Maybe I need to get that looked at, but no such problems on the Gladiator. Firm. As my wife said, oh, I don't want to ride the old Dynamo anymore. This is it. Speaking of the ride, it is a superior ride across all aspects, as I said. Acclaimed performance, sure-footedness, confidence-inspiring braking, while still retaining the ride comfort of its predecessor with its long travel suspension that really soaks up the bumps. I don't know whether the C-type suspension is any different to the previous models. Probably not. The springs look similar at least. It's a given that hydraulic brakes will be smooth and powerful compared to cable-operated brakes. Hydraulics are great. Not only great, but they're also big discs. I mean, 160mm diameter discs. They're actually larger than what was on my Wolf Warrior 10, much to my wife's delight. She now has the more powerful scooter with the biggest brakes, and in her eyes, the prettiest looking scooter in the garage. The thing that really struck me was the controlled steering feel on the Gladiator. Compared to the Dynamo, there is a big reduction in stem movement or stem wobble. When I went back to the Dynamo and rechecked and tightened it, I still got it in there, as I mentioned before. Not so with the Gladiator. The pole diameter and the lower stem clamp are the same dimensions and look to be the same items. It just could be tolerances from the factory on our old one, as I mentioned. But back to the steering. It was the nature of the rotation of the stem around the steering axis that felt really smooth, solid, and what I could say is a bit slower than the Dynamo, if that makes sense. Talking about slow steering on a sports motorbike, for instance, is usually a bad thing. You want instant, precise, and quick steering for a race-focused motorcycle, but not on a single-stem clamped e-scooter with 10-inch wheels. You know, these are 10-inch wheels, not 16 or 7-inch wheels on bigger bikes. There are several factors at work here, including the new single into dual stem arrangement. It's also got wider handlebars, giving you more leverage and stability. And even the rake or the lean of the stem could be a little bit different. But I'm guessing this feeling is contributed to also by the overall mass increase of the Gladiator. It's up about 6 kilos to 35 kilos versus 29 on the Dynamo. And also potentially the increased gyroscopic effect on the front wheel due to a fraction more weight of the wheel and motor assembly, etc. It's got 1200 watt motors now. It has hydraulic brakes with larger 160mm discs, and this results in a slight increase in the unsprung weight. So if you've got more mass rotating, it increases the tendency of that rotating object to maintain its orientation, thus a little less tendency for quick changes in steering direction, which, like I said, on a small wheel scooter or device is a good thing. The torque of the motors means with a little weight transfer, it's very easy to lift the front wheel off the pavement.
That's stepping on the back.
This is where the P12 acceleration settings may bear some time to customize to smooth out slow speed takeoffs. Settings range from 1 to 5. The higher the number equates to harder acceleration. You can control the overall maximum power with the P8 setting, i.e. it's roughly at 30% as delivered. Restricts the scooter to the Australian public road related area speed limit of 25 kilometers an hour. Riding along with the GPS speedometer on my phone, I've checked that the display speedo is really quite accurate. It was like within 0.4 kilometers an hour of what my GPS was showing. I had a really good close look at the wire protection. Excellent wire protection with metal spring cable guards that are inserted through any cable routing or routing areas to protect against abrasion and friction or rubbing on sharp plastics. In fact, when you look at those cable slots on the deck, there is clear plastic around them which don't have any sharp edges. The critical ones to watch for the electrical power connectors that go to the hub motors. Because the hub motors have a metal housing, if you've got any wires that or plastic sheets that go through and they're exposed and are not covered, then they're going to rub up against sharp metal, and it's just going to wear through the plastic. So if I had it close up here, you can see that the motor cabling have the metal collar or cable guard inserted through to the motor housing to protect the plastic sheath from any damage, which is good to see. Deck has good ground clearance, about 150 millimeters. I did notice on the front left part of the deck, there's an empty cable slot on the left-hand side of the deck, could allow water ingress. That lovely grip tape over the whole deck, completely covered. Very good finish in terms of no protruding bolts. It's got countersunk little bolts that don't protrude up and that are easily accessible with an Allen key if you want to get in and check the wiring, tidy up the wiring, or have a look inside the deck. Overall, I mean, I've always said the Bolzens are pretty well finished. I think this is another step up again, just with that attention to detail. Just the lineup of the plastic casings of the deck and everything are really nice and neat. Got some really big close-ups here where I went through the macro lens just to show the particular components. Bolts underneath it, which are pretty important because I know for instance, on the Wolf Warriors, that's what holds the front and rear subframes to the deck. Spring washers on the bolts. In terms of range, I'd travelled 33 kilometres when the voltmeter got down to about 50%. It's important when you're looking at your battery meter to go by the voltmeters, either the one on the left side with the key, or you can change the menu on the right side to display volts. The volts are far more accurate than little graphic displays, and on a 60 volt scooter, bit under 59 volts equate to 50%, so just sort of keep that 59 volts in your mind to when you want to turn around to go home. I'd expect an easy 50 kilometers and maybe 60 kilometers an hour, 60 kilometer range, which is bang on what I get from the Wolf Warrior 10, which also has a 60 volt 21 amp hour batteries, albeit slightly smaller motors. Similarly to the Dynamo, the lights being down low on the deck are probably not going to throw a long way ahead of you at night. You'll probably need to buy a couple of clip-on ones up top. Higher the better they are because they'll light up the road in front of you. The scooter comes with a little starter pack with a multi-tool, some safety side reflectors from what I can gather that you can stick on, the charger, which is a 1.75 amp hour power rating, and a QR code to scan a manual. So a bit of a point of difference is that Bolzzen have linked to a nicely written Australian specific manual for the scooter. $27.99 for the 6021, the 60 volt 21 amp hour, two 1200 watt nominal motors, 4000 watt peak power with 30 amp sine wave controllers with hall sensors. Big zoom hydraulic brakes, flexibility of an adjustable single into twin stem, high quality tyres, well put together from a company that ensures its products suit the local market. big load capacities for big Australians. Backing up with personalised service, nicely written but brief owner's manuals. That sub $3,000 price point, it's a busy market segment for a fast, capable scooter. You might have a peak above 3K, tempted by even higher performance, but then you've got to wonder where you're going to use that performance legally in Australia. On the flip side, the 5218, sporting the same running gear, including those lovely big brakes, is a fantastic scoot for under $2,300. Great choices. Pick your weapon.